Amanda Hansen back here at the Action News 5 digital desk. We are unwrapping and analyzing last night's election, a huge night for the city of Memphis, as Paul Young will be the new mayor to lead the city come January 1st. We've been talking to several different people, from DA Steve Mulroy to the city beat reporter for the Daily Memphian, Sam Hardiman. And joining us now on the Action News 5 digital desk is Dr. Earle Fisher with the Vote 901. Good morning.
Good morning, Sister Amanda. Thanks for having me. Been a great conversation so far, right?
Oh yeah, it's been interesting unwrapping and just getting people's thoughts on how things played out, what they expect, for the city of Memphis come January 1st. Obviously, a lot to unpack. So let's just get started. Any surprises? What are your thoughts from the results last night?
Well, I think I've been involved in the thrust of this election cycle from the front lines and very intimately since, at the very least, February, and moreover, been talking to candidates about, the way things might pan out as we were forecasting the potential of a saturated field of candidates way back in October of last year. So we started meeting with, Karen Camper and Paul Young and Van Turner, and months after included people like, Michelle McKissick, J.W. Gibson, conversations with James Harvey, and, the list goes on and on. Several of the mayoral candidate meet and greets that we had. I think it gave us a bird's eye view about what was going to happen. Hosting the People's Convention in August, I think, forecasted a lot of what ended up happening yesterday. And so for most of us who have been involved in our efforts, I don't think there was a lot of surprises. As Jackson Baker said a minute ago, I think the 8-3 race caught a lot of us off guard. So hats off to Councilwoman-elect Yolanda Cooper Sutton. But, people who reached out to me directly and asked me what I anticipated based upon our conversations and what the poll numbers were saying. We kind of felt like there were four very viable candidates, and that they would split a small number of votes in terms of turnouts. The turnout at 22%. I think it's important for us to note, Amanda, none of us should be running a victory lap right now. If you have a city that has about 625 to 650,000 people and about 350,000 eligible and registered voters, to only get 80,000 people to turn out is definitely not something that we should set as a standard. And it complicates things when you start talking about governing, because if you have someone who wins 25% of an 80,000 vote turnout, that's really only like 7% of the entire electorate. And one of the things that we were trying to avoid is the potentiality of such a saturated field causing a whole lot of apathy and ultimately not giving whoever wins a strong enough mandate or representation of the majority of the voters. So not a lot of surprises, not a time to run a victory lap. Of course, hats off to those who did win, especially, Mayor-elect Paul Young, and we'll see what comes next.
That was the exact question I was going to ask next from you, was voter turnout. And like you said, just a small percentage of people coming out to let their voice be heard. What do you think, what is it going to take to get more people to come out to make sure that they are contributing to who's going to be leading our city?
Well, we've always felt as if there's a connection between voter registration, voter education, voter empowerment, voter engagement that usually yields a higher level of turnout, but we have not been seeing a deep commitment across the board to voter education and voter empowerment. So for instance, I heard Sam Hardiman earlier talk about how, there were four major candidates and that the votes were not necessarily split. I will push back on that just a little bit. Although there were not many other votes collectively split amongst the others, if you add them up, if you add up everybody, 5 through 17, and if you consolidated them in a way, the majority of those votes could have very well been added to or allocated towards one of the top four and told a different story. But if you don't have a large commitment across the board to people being adequately educated on the issues, and not so much about personalities or individuals, but about policies and about issues, I think you run a risk of this constant disenfranchisement, disengagement, and despair. insofar as what the ultimate result of the political process is. Consider this. I mean, we had candidates who spent hundreds of thousands of dollars that could have been allocated towards voter education, but instead were allocated towards their individual campaigns. Um, one candidate spent upwards of $400,000 and didn't even get 3,000 votes. Another candidate upwards of $100,000 didn't get 2,000 votes. So if we can find a way to recalibrate how we allocate resources, if we can find a way to galvanize and organize and build an infrastructure where candidates are adequately vetted on the front end, if we can get city council to pass partisan elections and runoffs for mayor and super districts, I think we might end up with a higher result insofar as turnout is concerned. But one thing is for sure, Amanda, we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of this situation tomorrow. So it has to be a committed and continual effort and initiative from community members and partners and allies across the board over the next several years in order to get us where we need to be. I regretfully see too many people who seem to be willing to play politics as usual, even people who have heretofore identified themselves as progressives or their organizations as progressive. I think it was way too much politics as usual, and I just don't think it ended up boding well for certain candidates individually, but the community in general.
I was going to talk about just the community feeling right now. I think Memphis has been hurting a lot. We've been knocked around a bit. There's been a lot of things that have happened, a lot of people concerned about the crime. I don't know if you were able to listen to all of Paul Young's acceptance speech. One thing, I was talking to Sam, I know you've been listening to the interviews throughout the morning, but he was talking about how, his acceptance speech was very Memphis. It almost felt like there was an energy there. Is that something that maybe you agree with as far as being able to make some movement forward for the city?
Well, I think that there are emotional and aesthetic elements involved in every campaign. And I think there are times where you feel like things can be headed in a particular direction and head in a different direction. I think at the end of the day, whoever is elected into office is only going to be as good as the community is in engaging them and holding them accountable to making sure that they are enacting policies and practices that benefit the majority of the citizens. I've been in conversation with now Mayor-elect Young, for over the last year, and I think he knows and understands the value of transparency and accountability, and he expects to be held accountable. As I told him and I had told others, if you do win, the day after you're sworn in, I'll be coming after you until the conditions change, because now he is about to be the head of this city and inherit all of the problems and the profits that come along with that. So for me, it's about how we make sure that issues are front and center and not get caught up as much in the emotionalism of it all. I do think that if you calculate the number of votes that Mayor-elect Young generated and add to that what Van Turner was able to achieve, I think if you add those two together, it signifies that the city collectively wants to be moving in a more progressive way. And I think that the tide is turning in ways that it did not turn quite as sharply in 2015 or in 2019. And I think that that's something that we need to continue to watch because there does seem to be a transition of leadership from one generation to the next. But that won't amount to much more than stylistic and cosmetic talking points if we don't actually get in the weeds and discuss what it is we need to do over the next few weeks and months and years to galvanize the community towards what seems to be a more progressive agenda and potentially positive reality. I mean, I'd love to see, if I could say this right quick, man, I'd love to see, Mayor Harrington advise Mayor-elect Young, since he has so much experience. I think it's something that he could have done. He could have named the mayor months ago, and I've had some direct conversation with Mayor Harrington. I think I'd love to see that. I'd love to see a strategy of collaboration between Van Turner and Mayor-elect Young. I'd love to see J.W. Gibson and Michelle McKissick stay engaged in the efforts. I'd love to see Representative Karen Camper connect what's happening in Nashville to what's happening in Memphis, and all those other candidates that had all of those pledges about what they would do if they were in office. I would say to them as a challenge, you still have an opportunity to do it. You don't have to have that particular platform to help produce the things that we need to be produced in the city. So I'd love to see what happens next, and not just for those who won the elections, but also those who were not as successful.
No, and one thing that I thought was interesting, you were talking about Van Turner and Paul Young. You know, we've had a lot of conversations here on the desk saying that it seemed likely that they would pull the same kind of vote or two. So it was interesting to see,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that Paul Young was able to come out as the next mayor of Memphis. I know you mentioned that you said that you've had several conversations with him about, you know, just about what's next and his thoughts on things. I know one big topic of discussion for a lot of people has been, you know, the next man or woman in charge. Would they keep C.J. Davis as at the helm of the Memphis Police Department? From your conversations with Paul Young, do you have any thoughts on maybe how he might act as far as that goes?
No, I don't have any thoughts on it really, because he's been relatively clear that he doesn't hire and fire people on the campaign trail. I guess he's going to get in the office and assess every position as he should, and it'll ultimately be his decision to make, and the buck is going to stop with him. I hope that, unlike his predecessor, he does not pass the buck of responsibility off to community members or churchmen and women, that he ultimately says, I am accountable for how this turns out. This is a person that I have to hire, and the results of it should be part of my collective record. Having said that, it is very clear that there's a pattern and practice investigation of the Memphis Police Department. It's something that many of us called for quite some time, and he has to deal with that. It is no doubt that what happened with Tyree Nichols and so many other high-profile cases has been a stain of sorts on Chief Davis's record. And I think everybody deserves to pick their own people. So either Mayor-elect Young is going to hedge his bets to continue down the path that we've been going, or he's going to try to find a way to chart a new path forward and head us in a different direction. And I think what is most important for us is making sure whoever is in those positions are transparent and accountable to the majority of the citizens and not just a select few.
Dr. Fisher, this has been a great conversation. We're running out of time, but I wanted to say any last comments before we let you go?
No, just thanks for the coverage, and we look forward to seeing what's going to happen next. And we hope that all hands are going to be on deck for the next several seasons and sessions of what's happening in the city of Memphis. More elections on the horizon, and we got to develop some larger program and platform so that we aren't only talking about what's happening this way a couple of weeks or a couple of months prior to an election. I would love to see us much more informed, engaged, and empowered. Up to Vote 901 is committed to doing that, and I'm sure that there are other community partners committed to doing it as well, because this has never been, nor will it ever be, about any individual political savior. It is about what the people can do collectively to enact the type of vision that we all know we need and deserve. So thanks. I look forward to seeing what's happening next. I'll see y'all on the battlefield.
Well, Dr. Earle Fisher, yeah, for sure. You're welcome on the digital desk at any time. I've loved this conversation, and I think, you know, it puts a lot of, makes people think too, what's next, and where we go from here, and what needs to happen in order for that to get to that point. So thank you so much for taking some time this morning to join us.